Welcome back to another episode of the Startup Therapy Podcast. This is Ryan Rutan, joined as always by my friend, the founder and CEO of startups.com, Wil Schroter. Wil, it's no secret that as founders, we work and we work and we work. And we do all these things with the hope for some level of payoffs or some freedoms or some joy out of all this stuff that we do. And yet, like when we get there and we begin to celebrate some of these wins, were you celebrating with a whole bunch of your friends who were all just as happy as you were with what you had just achieved?
I was hoping so.
Yeah.
I really thought. I'm shocked at how, as we become more successful, if we become more successful, and this isn't just with startups, it's with anything in life, right? How what we think will be this like loop of validation where we're like, oh, look how well I did, and it reflects on the people around us that are like high-fiving us, becomes a loop of resentment. It becomes a loop of people saying, fuck you. Right? Yeah. You're like, wait, what just happened here? Right? Like, imagine for a second, you've been training forever for the Ironman. You work your ass off for it, and you come in and you win the Ironman. Yeah. And at the end of it, where all your friends are standing, they're all booing you. That's essentially what happens. And so I think it's worth unpacking today why it happens. Why do our friends resent us? Our friends, peers, everybody, around.
To me, they're less important because I kind of don't care, right? Obviously, the closer they are, the more it impacts me, the more you feel it.
It is. And theoretically, those are the people that are supposed to care about you.
Yep. I think that's why it hurts the most.
So yeah, it's also antithetical. Like, how is it that these people that I thought really cared about me kind of hate me now?
Yeah.
Like I thought doing something good brings good, and all of a sudden doing good brings bad. I think it's important for folks to understand where it comes from, what's the source of that, how founders deal with it, good and bad, right? And I think it's also helpful to be able to say, how much should we give in or not to that? Like, should we let all the haters, so to speak, determine what we're allowed to say? Conversely, should we say what we want and be surprised when people are like, go fuck yourself?
It's funny. It's funny how often we have to develop a thick skin as founders. It's almost like different types of permeability, right? What works for water permeability doesn't work for bullets, doesn't work for electricity, right? Like it's as if you'd think once you just became thick skinned and you get to this point, you'd be like, I'm okay, I'm good. It's not going to bother me. And yet it's like each one of these new scenarios, you have to have a different type of thick skin to not be bothered. Because I had clearly, by the time this kind of thing happened to me, I had already developed pretty thick skin, having been punched in, not literally, but figuratively punched in the face by clients, probably pretty close to that in reality. And just, surviving all of what it took to build and sell that first business. And yet when those things started coming around, I was like, really, I'm unprepared for this. I've never seen that punch before.
I'll give you an example of the first time this happened to me, where it was like really, really obvious. Okay. So here's the setup. Figure throughout my life, I was the person on the outside. There were wealthy people, and I was always the person on the outside. I grew up in Connecticut, and people I was a rich kid. I was not. I was the polar opposite of a rich kid, but there were lots of other rich kids, and I was forced to grow up watching from the outside what it was like to not be a rich kid. Right? Oddly, I don't know that I resented it. It just sucked not to have it. And when I say it, people might be thinking I'm talking about golf course memberships and private jets. I'm talking about things like food and family, like fundamentals. So I'm growing up without much, and I build this internet company, starts doing well, and I remember I go out and I buy a Lamborghini. Okay, the most quintessential poor kid makes money, tries to be rich kid. Somebody had written this to me a couple hours ago. He's like, that's what poor people do when they think that's what rich people do.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, nope, that's exactly what
that's pretty close.
I can't deflect that at all.
How was I supposed to know?
Yeah. So anyway, I buy this car, and this is this is decades before social media, when if you wanted to post something, so to speak, that actually meant calling someone and having them come to your house, or you go there and actually talking to them.
I mean, you could have made it. You could have included it in the annual Christmas newsletter photo.
The group backs.
Yeah.
So I called my buddy. We've known each other since middle school, so we've known each other a long time. He's a great guy. And I said, I got a surprise for you. I want to show this to you. And so he comes over, and I open up the garage, and there's a red Lamborghini, right? And he's like, huh. And I was like, weird response. Now, mind you, I'm 22, so is he, right? We're getting out of college at this point, so it's not like
it should have been like, can I drive it? Right? That should have been the reaction, right? That's what you're thinking, right?
And I think just if I backtrack, I can't remember exactly what my expectation was, but at a high level, it was probably something like this. Wil, You are the coolest, smartest, most attractive man that has ever lived, and no one deserves this more than you. Not
Yeah.
exactly those
I
words,
couldn't have written it better myself. Yeah.
but some version of like this validation, right? I'm sure that I was seeking. So here's what he says. He goes, "Huh, well, must be nice." And
Must be
that would be the
nice.
first time I had ever heard "must be nice" weaponized toward me, and it would not be the last. "Must be nice" is maybe one of the most original OG passive
Oh
aggressive
yeah.
dickhead comments of all time.
It's a passive aggressive battle axe, right?
Oh
Like
my God, it's
it
amazing.
hits hard. Let me contrast that with my situation because look, you bought a Lambo. That's a strong statement. It was also
Yeah.
bright yellow. It's a strong statement. In my case, I don't feel like I deserved it at all. I had just simply gone back to my hometown and bought a billboard that says "better than you" since 1978.
That was social media
proven
before
in
social media.
2001, right?
Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
I didn't do that. So it was funny. The first time this came up was in a conversation with somebody, and I was going through kind of what had happened after the sale of the company, what had happened with because they were kind of asking, they were digging,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
should have
Mhm.
understood that they weren't curious, that they were looking for something to pick the fight over, right? And I started explaining like, here's what happened with somebody. X went to this person, X went to that. I had a bunch of college
Yeah.
friends got checks at the end, and they were using them to do things like pay off their student loans. Or one started buying early real estate over an Italian village. That worked out well. A lot of foresight there because they were not nice at the time. Like you
Yeah,
ran a
right.
crack den for 15 years, and then it turned out to be something really nice. All that, and then I said something like, I didn't use mine for that because I had a partial scholarship and something else, and then I got I don't remember if it was exactly the "must be nice." So naive was I, it didn't even occur to me. I was like, which part? Meaning like that I had the scholarship, or he's like, no, that you can basically, it was something along the lines of like play God, or or stand on high and distribute checks. And I was like, holy shit, did you hear what I just said? Like I just said that like people did these cool, great things. I wasn't even talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
me. Like we hadn't even gotten to
yeah,
that part. Yeah, I did some dumbass shit with my money too.
yeah.
But like we hadn't even gotten to that. This guy was mad about that. I'm like,
Right.
what? By the way, clearly like a validation seeker himself, and hopefully he won't figure out who this is. It's not you, Brian May. I promise. I'm just kidding. It's not even a real name. I looked
At
up. My name's
1452
Ryan. I
Dublin
looked up
Drive.
at the
Yeah, yeah,
calendar.
yeah.
It's May. It's not. This is not a real person. There may be
Yeah.
somebody I know named that. So let's be really
Yeah.
careful. It's not actually the thing. But this was one of those individuals that, like, I remember around the time of graduation, it was like seeking that top job coming out of business school, threw it in everybody's face that he had the interviews, whatever, got it. And we actually had a party to celebrate him getting this job. And this is the same person that will come back around and just like absolutely undercut you.
Well, but it's odd. It's odd when you first experience it because you don't understand where it's coming
Yep.
from. Later on, you'll learn exactly where it's coming from. That's what we're about to talk about. What I didn't understand was I thought, again, at the time, being naive, that if I was successful, I would be like rewarded in a high five back to
Yeah.
the, training for the Ironman and crossing the finish line. What I hadn't planned for at all was that my success is a reflection of someone else's failure. And that is what I didn't start to understand. And I think, founders that are listening, particularly those that are listening right now, we have a lot of actually very successful founders that listen to the podcast. Thank you, by the way. And they're like, yep, that's pretty much what happens.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden you get vilified for something you worked hard to achieve.
Yeah, man. It's awful, but it's exactly that. It's like we polished the trophy that we won, that we worked hard for, and all they see in that is a reflection of how they fell short. That's it. It's such a sad fact.
It's also not what you expect.
Yep.
Okay. Now, if you've had a different upbringing and you've seen this happen, and again, you did expect it, good for you. I certainly did not. And so for me, I was like, my relationships are all about to get better, like better. They all got worse. They all got worse.
Yep.
And like when I talk to, actually, this is a good one. When I talk to professional athletes, right? When I talk to professional athletes who've made lots of money in whatever league they came from, they all have exactly the same story. I'm always like, and then at what point did every family member come to you and ask you for money and you eventually had to say no and then they all hated you for it?
Yeah, the second
Every
they found out,
single one of them
Yep.
was like, oh, that happened in my second year, or that happened when I got signed, or that happened, whatever. And I say professional athletes because their salaries are giant.
Yeah.
They happen at a young age and they're very public. So everyone knows they have money.
And everybody else, there's always a lot of people, maybe not the family, but there's always a lot of people who think that could have been me. It was just slightly different circumstance, right? So there's all this, it's this built-in ability to resent them for it, right?
You bet. And so we get into this place where in our minds, again, we think our success will validate us. But part of that validation, whether we like it or not, comes from the people around us, especially the people that we care about. It's every kid trying to impress their dad. no matter how old they get. I've got friends that they're in their 50s right now. They're still trying to make a statement to their dad.
I told you we were just in Florida a couple of weeks ago, and we found a bunch of old game footage. And I found one. It wasn't even me scoring a goal, but I found one of me making a beautiful cross to a header goal. It was a beautiful play. So I just took my phone out, recorded a 15-second video clip, and sent it to my dad. And I knew exactly what he would say. Great job, bud. And I was so excited to hear that. Right?
Yep.
I'm 46 years old, and that game happened 30 plus years ago. Still felt nice.
And a founder that reached out to me to comment on a thread like this a little while ago, and was like, I have a friend who was a national champion, right, in a very high-end sport, came in second, and their father's response was, congratulations on coming in not first.
Ouch.
That's their kid, dude.
Second place is the first loser, right? Yeah,
that's exactly it, right? That's exactly what they said.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
What? Yeah.
Literally. Like, so again, what throws me is for a lot of us as founders, we do have an insecurity and a validation loop like everyone else. It's not unique to founders. Ours just manifests often in our work, right? Like it's a big part of where we get our validation. We try something really risky and we know it's hard. So when it works, we are validated from our risk and the effort we put into it. But also when it works, somebody else looks at it from the outside and they say, must be nice. Must be nice is just a different way of saying you don't deserve this.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's a bit of a dick punch.
And it's so hard not to take it personally. I do get it, right? The point that you're making
is personal.
Is a very valid one. It feels very personal. I understand that they might not even be trying to do that. It's not that they're offended by our win necessarily. They're offended by the lack of their own win, right? Yeah. We're now a mirror where they can look at that and go, here's where I fell short. This is giving me a chance to compare myself. Which is an entirely unfair comparison. We've talked about this. Like they're comparing the outcome. They're not comparing, well, what were you doing for the last 9 years while I was building and killing myself to do this while you were playing golf and collecting a salary and whatever. I didn't begrudge you those things at that time. You don't get to begrudge me this now. Of course, that's the logical argument. It just doesn't work that way. They're going to pick that one little moment, the end game, and say, yeah, I want to compare myself to that. I'm going to feel bad about it, which is such a bizarre behavior to me.
Let's talk about how people actually process our success. Sure. So we understand kind of what this rubric looks like and the why. Now, again, I think most people listening have a pretty good sense for it, but let's just say it anyway so it's defined. And I would say let's use social media as the perfect social experiment for how people process themselves through the lens of others.
Sure.
And I say social media because your feed is a nonstop validation loop for everyone else and for you. And depending on who you are and how you feel about your life, etc., that feed is like a Rorschach test of your own insecurities.
Yep.
If you're insecure in your marriage, you're going to see all the people that are happy and hate them. If you're insecure in your job, you're going to see all the people that are doing well and hate them. Like you name it, your insecurities will reflect from that feed. Now, when I think about that, I always think about when the people are posting, what they thought the people responding were actually thinking.
Yeah.
For example, person posts that I'm on the best vacation ever, coolest vacation ever. There's a handful of people that also think that, or maybe that could go on that vacation or are on that vacation that are like, oh, wow, I was actually there too. Okay. And even when they say that, it's a validation of saying I'm as good as you are. But most of the people either aren't on vacation, myself included, or they can't afford that vacation, or your vacation represents something they cannot do and they resent you. Is that your fault? Should you have not posted about? I mean, we'll talk about like how to react to all this. But Ryan, when you think of other people or even yourself reacting to other people's success in whatever form via your own insecurities, how do you process this stuff?
It's interesting. You and I
are very self-aware. I'm curious how you look at it.
Yeah, it's funny. I guess part of that self-awareness was understanding that I do process this a little bit differently. We've talked about this, like I don't have that immediate reaction. I don't resent people for what they have. I don't know, because I guess part of it's probably I'm on social media a lot less than most people I know. And so like I haven't flexed that muscle enough to know. And maybe I just don't see enough to feel resentment. But for me, I've never, and maybe it's an ego thing, but I've never really thought about what anybody else did as having any bearing on what I'm doing, unless it's direct. Like if you and I go play racquetball and you beat me at racquetball, I probably won't resent you for it, but I'll recognize that you beat me at racquetball. I think what's really bizarre to me, this is the part that I really have a hard time even intellectualizing, right? Because I can intellectualize the rest of it. I get it. I get where it comes from. I get the insecurity piece. I get all that. Here's the thing I have a really hard time intellectualizing. It starts to treat these accomplishments that are completely unrelated, your life, my life, your outcome, my outcome, as some sort of a zero sum game. You got it, therefore I can't.
Yep.
That's the part that there's no logical argument around that makes any sense to me. And so this is the part that I think I really struggle with. And I think, for better, for worse, and again, maybe it's an ego thing where maybe I just don't value other people's opinions as much as some people do in that way. Even when I get that kind of negative feedback, like for example, when that whole scenario happened that I was describing earlier about somebody just being like, wow, you asshole, you help people pay for their college. I'm like, it didn't bother me. It didn't make me think I should change something. I did something wrong. It just made me think, what a bizarre reaction, right? And so I think for me, at least, I haven't had to develop a particularly thick skin around this. Maybe I just haven't been successful enough. I don't know, to where it's mattered that much to me, to the point where like I haven't ever felt hurt by it. I never saw somebody resenting me for something where it wasn't so thinly veiled in their own insecurities that I was okay with it.
I'll give you a totally different example where I see this. My wife, Sarah, with all her girlfriends, and she has lots of girlfriends from different cities we've lived in, different stages in our lives, etc. And most of them, for whatever reason, don't like their spouses. Okay. And she's like, one of the most common threads whenever we get together, and the girls get together, everybody bitches about their spouses.
Sure.
Okay. She's like, except me. And she's like, I just want me, I'm not unhappy. Like, I don't have anything bad to say about you. And Ryan, you've known me for a very long time. I don't think you've ever heard me say a negative word about my wife. I just don't have anything to say. Like, she's
I remember the only thing I can recall, Will, you did say once, Sarah just took a COVID test and it came back negative. That's the only time I can think of Sarah and negative in the same sentence. Like, that's it.
Very
that's
specific.
And that's 4 years ago and it happened once.
But so Sarah's friends are pissed at her.
Yep. Isn't that crazy? Like, we're mad at you for not being as mad as we are. Like,
they've said as much. They have said as much.
Oh, outright.
You know, I've talked in other cases where people have come to me and said, like, your situation with your wife is bullshit. I'm like, huh? They're like, there's no way you're that happy. I'm like, sorry?
This will show you like how deep some of this stuff goes. I remember this once where, like, because my wife Nargis has the same kind of things like that. And there's WhatsApp groups. There's like, they talk, they do whatever together. There was something where she was basically describing like, no, we don't have that challenge. Right. Like, or maybe it was something that like I did or that we do together. I don't remember what it was. Doesn't really matter. But the comment that came back was, what did that cost you? Oh my God. Meaning that like, there's got to be another side to this coin. There has to be another shoe that's going to fall. You can't possibly have something good without something bad having come as a result. Like, you must pay for it elsewhere. I'm just like, wow. Right. Like, I guess here's the other part that I don't get. I legitimately do, for some people I care about. Like, if Elon Musk gets another private jet, I'm not like, good for him. I don't resent it, but it doesn't change the price of tea in my China. I just don't give a shit, right? If something happens to somebody that I care about, legitimately care about, and have some attachment to their life in a way where I know what they've been through, I know what they're doing, and I know what it cost them to get that thing, I legitimately take joy and can feel gratitude for what they've gotten. And that makes me feel great. It makes me feel better. Why wouldn't you choose that over the exact polar opposite, which is what we're saying most people do? I just still, again, I go back to the fundamental flaw in the logic around why this is happening in the first place.
Well, but again, I'm using these examples of places where, like, you and I are fairly secure in those aspects of our lives to point out that, like, even still, we all process our insecurities, again, as a reflection, right? And again, this all maps back to how founders need to understand this, right? The idea that I'll be successful and it'll have no impact on everybody else. Everybody will just be happy for it. And I'll get tired of high-fiving everybody all the time is such a giant miss. The flip side, where they're like, oh, it must be just my friends that are kind of douchebags about this whole thing, or my dad or my cousin or whatever. No, it's the whole world, dude. And it gets exponentially worse as things get better for you. It gets more isolating. It tends to be why wealthy people begin to isolate. Part of that's because there's a lot of people trying to take from them. I mean, straight up. But the other part of it is you don't want to be in a situation where the people around you constantly have to walk on eggshells. Okay. I'll give you an example. Years back, this is around time where I bought that car. I'm at a family event and I'm talking to one of my cousins. Good enough guy, so no issues there. But I'm talking to one of my cousins. This is, again, early before I started to really understand like what you're allowed to say and not say and all this good stuff. And he was talking about how his car broke down and that it was going to cost as much as like $500 to fix the whatever was wrong with it, and how basically like that was more money than he had. I immediately shot back. I'm like, dude, I know exactly what you're talking about. I was pulling into a restaurant the other day and I bottomed out the front end of my Lamborghini, tore the fender off the front, or the fairing rather, and it cost me $10,000. And he looked at me like, "Fuck you!"
Yeah.
Right now, to be fair, at the time, I say this to say I would never say that now. It would never even occur to me.
Look, you were emotional maturity.
I hadn't learned the lesson yet,
yeah.
right? I thought he was going to be like, "Man, doesn't that suck?" Like, I was going to say, "Yeah, like I'm dealing with a problem just like that. Like something broken, expensive. I hate it."
Same, but different, right?
Nah, no. Yeah, and so you could take that version of me, go to a different social circle, and have the other person say, "Hey, I just bottomed out my Rolls Royce. It cost me $10,000 to replace whatever." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I just bottom," and then you're on the same path. At the same time, my cousin, he doesn't want to be around me, right? For that reason, he wants to be around someone else. Where it's like, dude, I could never afford $500.
Where a $500 problem is a big problem, and it is the problem.
Validation loop either way. I get it. I get it. I'm not faulting anybody for it. But I think it's important, like I said, that we understand how people process success, which then leads to the question, should we deflect this or attract this? And what I mean about that, how much should we care about what other people think? Here's what I mean. I'm not saying do we have a right to just be jerks about it? Not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, at what point is it our liability for how people react to things? And on the other hand, do we keep it a secret? Do we just never talk about it because we're so fearful that unless we absolutely mute ourselves, that will create these feelings? Do we prevent other people from feelings by virtue of us not talking? What are your thoughts there?
Are we going? Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting way of looking at it, and I think there are aspects of it where I would probably go. So the spectrum here is like you're going scorched earth versus secret squirrel, right? I'm either going to shout this from the rooftops or I'm going to hide it in the basement, right? Like I'm digging a hole and nobody's ever going to know about it. What's interesting is that I think if you go to either ends of those holes, you are going to invite some challenges.
Something that's really funny about everything we talk about here is that none of it is new. Everything you're dealing with right now has been done 1,000 times before you, which means the answer already exists. You may just not know it, but that's okay. That's kind of what we're here to do. We talk about this stuff on the show, but we actually solve these problems all day long at groups.startups.com. So if any of this sounds familiar, stop guessing about what to do. Let us just give you the answers to the test and be done with it. Let's talk about two different versions, okay? Let's first talk about I don't give a shit what anybody thinks. I'm going full guns, like full Elon Musk, right? Like just, I don't care.
Want to see my new tattoo on my 12-pack abs? It's my new tattoo of my new Lambo, right?
Yeah,
like it's zero shits given. I'm going all at it.
Tattoo of abs on my abs.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so that is the epitome of social media, right? The quote influencers. My job is to remind you every single day of what I have and have you want me more. Now, those tend to be, and this isn't me hating, I'm just matter of fact, in my experience, they tend to be the most insecure people I've ever met. If I was that insecure, right, and I'm insecure in my own way, so I'm not saying I'm not, but if I was that insecure, I'd be doing exactly that. That is exactly how I would be trying to fix that problem. And I get it. But Ryan, we see a lot of that. We see a lot of the, I don't care, I'm going for it, let the chips fall where they may. What's your take on that?
You know what's funny? When I think about the amount of that I see on social, specifically on social, where anything can be fabricated, anything can be made to look like anything. Most of the stuff that I see on social, my perception, I could be completely wrong. My perception is that it's not actually stuff that I have. I'm trying to use this to attract that stuff, right? So if I'm showing myself on a private jet, I probably don't have a private jet. I want a private jet, and I'm trying to show that I have a private jet to show off the image so that I can go get the clients and make the money or whatever. It feels more like that to me. Again, it's social media being what it is. Maybe that's just the echo chamber that I find myself caught in. And maybe that's why I avoid it as much as I do. And again, like I think you said it's going to depend on the insecurities of that person, right? It's going to reflect back. Like the things that you see them shouting from the rooftops are probably the things that they still feel least comfortable about. All right. The
Right.
things
Right.
that are right. I don't have as much money as I want, or I'm comparing myself to somebody else. So let me do everything I can to magnify what I do have. We get back to the underlying causes of these things. Some of it goes deeper than that, right? I definitely remember a big part of it for me was justifying the fact, and we've talked about this a lot. Well, we've done a full episode on this, and it's come up in a lot of other episodes, justifying what I gave up to get it to myself, right? But also wanting to memorialize it and have people react to it. Basically, so validate that what I got was good, right? Like my Lambo, like my private jet, like my whatever. Because deep down, I go back and say, was it worth it? Because of the college experiences that we gave up, because of the girlfriends we didn't have, because of all that stuff that we did and all those things that we didn't do, right? So I think a big part of it goes back to sort of what's the hole you're filling? What's the void that you're trying to scrape some filler into?
When I look at the far end of that spectrum, which is screw it, I'm going to just go full guns about everything and just kind of vomit my success. You have to know what that's costing you. There's no way. There's a friend of ours, both of us have, and a lot of folks here might know on social media, Dan Martell, right? I love Dan, so this isn't me not knocking him, but I want to point out his positioning. Okay, in a post a while back, Dan even like talked about this. So this is not just my words; they're also his. Dan is unashamed about everything. If you get on Dan's social media, you will know that Dan has a 6-pack or an 8-pack or a 20-pack or
it's a
however
lot
many
of
packs he's got left. He's got a really nice car and he lives big. Dan wants you to know that that's part of his brand and his image, etc. I love giving Dan shit about it. I texted him I texted him at the end of the year, I think. And I said, I just need to know how much money your abs made last year.
Yeah.
But he's cool about it, right? Whatever. Doesn't matter. Point is, Dan's like, look, for years and years and years, I was always afraid to talk about stuff like this, but be open about like my success or what I'm proud of, etc. He's like, and then I realized it made me really unhappy. And now I'm just not going to do it anymore. Yep. And if you don't like it, that's on you. But I'm not going to mute myself for your benefit.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting. That was honest and a bit vulnerable. And so Dan gets to live with an honesty. And again, we're talking at the other end of the spectrum with himself at the cost of everyone else.
Yeah. So dig into that. What exactly do you mean by at the cost of everyone else? So to what cost? In the cost of, does it cost Dan something? I heard you say it costs everyone else, but meaning that like he's going to have to take hate and vitriol or whatever, or that it actually costs these other folks something by contrasting themselves?
Dan understands very well how other people feel because he felt that way himself.
Yeah.
Like when Dan posts, I'm rich, I have, nice car or something like that. He knows damn well that other people feel like, shit, I wish I had that and fuck you, Dan. But Dan's like, I just don't care. I'm not going to mute myself for your benefit. So by virtue of that, he's like, yes, I do know that it's going to hurt you. And that's your problem, not mine. I'm not advocating that approach, but I will say that there is some merit in the honesty of it. Right. In other words, he's like, why is it my job to make you feel good? Why is it my job to make up for your inadequacies or your insecurities or whatever you have? And he's not wrong. It's not his job per se. Not the way I would play it, right? Personally, because I don't have a gear like that where I'm just like, I don't care how you feel. This is how I feel. And if it hurts you, that's your problem. I'm an empath.
Again, I don't understand what it buys you. I just don't get what it buys. I get maybe what it buys him is maybe filtering really hurts him, right? That's a personal thing. But then even there, like I'm going to go back to like, okay, well, but that's my pain and that's for me to deal with. And if I'm causing lots of other people pain, but then I would also go back to, but why? Why is that actually painful for them? Why can't they just appreciate my abs and move on with their life, right? Like, hey, Will, by the way, do you know what has 6 hands, 6 legs, 6 abs, and spaghetti sauce on its chin?
What's that?
You, me, and Dan at lunch.
That's the dumbest riddle. I love it. So, okay, so let's go to the other end of the spectrum. I want to avoid resentment. So I'm never going to put myself in a position where anybody can see it happen. Okay. I'm going to never talk about it. I'm going to go extreme humility, etc. Now, generally speaking, I would say that works great because you will avoid resentment. Obviously, if people have no idea you've had any success, then there's nothing to resent. We had a guy that worked for us years and years and years ago, and he was a developer, really nice guy. And months and months and months went by. And this, Ryan, this is back when we used to give like paper paychecks.
Oh yeah.
And And I noticed that all of his paychecks, in the envelopes, were just stacking up on his desk, unopened. And I was like, maybe there's something that he's doing with those, whatever. Like, just I've never seen anything like it. Much less not caring that
Right.
uncashed checks were sitting on your desk. So at some point, I pulled him aside. I was like, hey, is everything okay? Like, whatever. He's like, yeah, it's embarrassing. I'm like, okay, this is gonna be awesome. He's like, years ago, my dad sold a company for like quite a bit of money, and put a lot of it in my account, and I actually just don't need money. It's like, not,
I
not,
actually just don't
not,
need money. Yeah. Well,
not. And here's the
can I
funny thing.
just take you off payroll then, but leave your office pass valid?
As I slowly grab and slide those checks
Uh-huh.
back, I'm like, oh,
Just
good to know.
remind me what your signature looks like
Yeah,
again.
do you have more friends like this, perhaps? I would like to employ them as well. But and I'd known him for years as a friend, right? I'd known of this situation, but it wasn't until he ended up working with me and I was paying him till I saw it up in lights. And
Yeah.
here's what I'm saying: he was the guy that did not want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Now part of that is because he didn't earn it. Okay. Right. So it's a little awkward to say like I'm rich, but my dad wrote me the check, right? And I hate to be sexist, but especially as a dude, right? Like,
Yeah.
I see this less with women than I see with men, but I see it painfully with men. And it's kind of an
I
old
didn't kill
school
this and
emotion.
drag it into the cave myself, right?
Kinda, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, point is, that's on the other end of the spectrum where this guy has millions and millions and millions of dollars and doesn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Now, by way of that, he also doesn't drive the resentment that comes with it. He's going to lunch with all the coworkers, and they have no idea that he has millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So it never comes up.
Right.
No one ever gives him a hard time about it, whatever. Now, again, a little bit different because in this case he didn't earn it, so it may make him feel shitty to talk about it, right? Because then he has to explain where it came from and didn't
Yep.
earn it. Like it actually kind of has a negative connotation. But let's take that back. If we had earned something, but we also become so concerned, so fearful of sharing it that we hold ourselves back, that we mute ourselves, is that okay?
Depends, I guess. I mean, at that point, you're kind of living in a prison built out of other people's insecurities, right?
That's kind of the opposite of the Dan
But are
approach,
you?
right?
Right? I guess it goes back to like, are you holding yourself back from some necessary growth or validation or something that you deeply need? Again, like then maybe just go to therapy instead and find out why. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right to have to do that. And so, one of the things that I think I have tried to do, and I don't know how successful I've been at it, but the things that I like to talk about in terms of accomplishments are things that I feel like are attainable, right? That it's not like the big financial outcome or at some points in my life where like post sale of a company, I had all the time freedom in the world. I didn't talk about the fact that I don't have to do anything for the next 6 months. I can do whatever I want. What I would talk about instead were things like I've decided to spend 3 more hours a week on learning language. I've decided to spend, every weekend doing some of it, like give something that like actually can be copied. Right.
Right.
And maybe part of that is like just me also looking not for validation, but camaraderie, right? Like, okay, this is something we could all do. Right. I appreciate that. I like that. Right. I was a team sports guy. Right. So like I'm probably constantly seeking my next team and people that want to participate in what I'm doing. But I think I've also been fairly careful about choosing, participation. If you like show up at your high school reunion, you're like, it's to race Lambos. Who else has a Lambo? Right. Like they can't participate in that. Right. I know you're doing that, but like you get it. So I think that's been part of it for me is that I don't have to be completely couched in talking about what I have, what I've achieved, the things that I do enjoy in life, the things that I'm proudest of, some of which have absolutely nothing to do with financial success, right? It's like, I'm proud of the way my family interacts with each other. I'm proud of the fact that like we have time together. We do these things that literally anyone can achieve.
Yeah, but it's interesting, Ryan, because like I tell Sarah this from time to time when you and I share on the weekends, like what we're working on, what we're doing over the weekend. And I'm invariably saying I'm building something to do with the house. And you talk about all these cool adventures that you're going on with your family. And I always say to Sarah, when I share that with her, I'm like, Ryan is like the Jeff Bezos of dads. He's like ultra dad. And let me build on that. And I say, I'll never be that level of dad, like have that level of engagement and planning and all the stuff. But I don't resent you for it. I'm actually, my feeling is if that's what I wanted, or if I was that person, that's what I'd be doing.
Yep.
But I'm not. And I'm okay with that. But I think I'm okay with it because I have enough other things in my life that I feel like I'm secure with, so to speak.
Sure. Well, it's also, again, go back to like the fact that you've got some baseline securities there, which is like, you may not do all the things I do with my kids. I don't do all the things you do with your kids, right? Like,
Yeah.
but it's not like you're an absent father. It doesn't like,
Yeah.
what are your kids' names and what are their ages? I don't know.
Right.
Let me
Yeah.
ask my
Yeah.
wife. Right. It's not like that. And so I think that's part of it, where I think that's where it gets really tricky, because in a lot of cases, I think I am picking things where the contrast won't be so harsh, right? Or said differently, if it is that harsh, well, maybe hopefully it'll motivate somebody, right? If you're that bad of a father that like that you look at me and go, you asshole, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, but like good on me for like shaking you a little bit.
For
Okay.
sure. For
Like
sure.
that
I
feels
agree.
okay. Because again, it's not unachievable. I'm choosing to spend time. You know what's funny about time? You get exactly the same amount of it as I do, right? We all, every time I spend a minute, I get another one for free, right? So just you get to choose how you spend your time.
Let's talk a little bit about kind of like how we can process this successfully,
Yeah.
right? Here's what I have seen. If I've seen any pattern among countless founders that that we know that have done well, that have seemed to have managed the resentment. I'd say fundamentally, there's two things that they've done well. Number one, it's a self-awareness that this exists.
Yep.
Again, me, Lambo at 22, zero self-awareness. In this case, it wasn't just me being a douche. I was being a douche, but I didn't realize I was being a douche, right? It would take me way too long to figure that out later. But
douche and deliberate douche are two different, very different flavors, right? Like,
correct.
Yeah.
Like, and now, like, if I post something on social media, I do have a version of me that says, who will this affect and how?
Yep.
And will it do it to some, like, will it hurt someone? Is probably the best way to say it. Part of me is mad about that. Part of me is mad that like, going back to the Dan Martell thing, that I have to think like that, right? That I'm doing it because someone else isn't happy with their life. So I have to modify.
It's the walking on eggshells thing. I shouldn't have to change how I think or feel or act unless it's outright amoral, unethical, harmful by intent. I shouldn't have to defend you from your insecurities. That's your job, pal.
Okay, so let me build on the other side of it. The second part, the most important part, is humility. Being able to say something, an accomplishment or something, but do it with enough humility that you don't sound like a douchebag. And I'll give you a great example of someone who did this recently, and everybody can see it. Not this past year, but the year before. Caleb Williams of USC won the Heisman. Okay. Now, Caleb is not the Steve Jobs presenter. He's reading from cards. But here's what was so good about his Heisman acceptance speech. Okay, now, number one, you're in a room full of athletes, but you're specifically now standing across three other people that didn't get it.
Didn't get the award. Yep.
And you have to address it directly.
High contrast situation. Yep.
Correct, right? Which is beautiful. Caleb goes around the room and he cites all the people in the room, right? All of the other former pro athletes that were on the dais. He was like, listen, and he pointed to specific people. He said, you guys are the reason that I'm here, right? He said, as a kid, I wanted to be you. I would do anything in order to be able to stand up here one day and be talking to you, right? Cool moment. And he looked at the other three quarterbacks, right? Heisman hopefuls. And he said, guys, like, any one of you could have just as soon won this and have been as deserving, okay? Great humility. Now, I would like to believe he believes that. Here's what he then did. He said, let me tell you the story of how I got here. And he told the story in a way such as to say, no one believed I could do this. I didn't believe I could do this, right? And I was fortunate enough to have a couple things land my way for this to happen. All of a sudden, here's a guy who could have been breeding all kinds of resentment. You could have thought of a very different speech, right? And I'm sure other Heisman candidates or winners have given the wrong speech. But what he did, he used gratitude and humility. It's hard to hate a person that's humble and grateful. And now, I don't mean in a false way, like the humble brag. I mean in a genuine way.
Right. Let me say something really douchey and then throw a little self-deprecation on it, and that'll make it all better. No, it doesn't.
Yeah. And so where I think it comes from, and again, there's one thing to do it in a rehearsed speech, but there's another way to do it in your daily life. I'm not pretending I'm great at it, but I understand the formula. And when I watch other founders who have success, but don't seem to drive that same level of humility, here's what's important. They are talking about it. They are public about what they've done, but they do it in a way where you can't hate them for it.
Yep.
It's an art, and some people do it really well.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is an art. And I think that it kind of, for me, it's going to go back to like, what are we actually talking about? Right. I think there are certain things that are going to be more highly charged. If you're talking about money or possessions, always going to be like that. Right. And so I think that part of it is also even just in your own self-awareness that we talked about before is like getting past that stage and really thinking about what actually matters. Right. Like I've started to realize for me, the things that matter, having achieved some of the material wealth, right? Never had a Lambo, did have a Ferrari Matchbox once. Pretty sweet. But never had Lambo. But what's really becoming apparent to me is like, here are the three things that matter the most to me. Having some freedom over how I spend my time. Get to spend it with startup founders doing startup founder things. Amazing.
Yep.
Who I get to spend my time with. Again, the startup founders, control over my nervous system, right? Being able to regulate my nervous system. Those are the three things that actually make for a great or a not great day for me at this point, right? You could take some money away, you could add some more in. It isn't going to change the temperature that much for me at this point.
So do you think we can avoid resentment altogether?
Well, yes. Yes, I do. Do I think we can stop people from being resentful? No. I think we can avoid having it impact us by doing the things that you just said, right? Be humble about it. Be grateful for what you have. Because if you're just talking about it, you don't appreciate it. What are you actually doing? What are you actually doing? You're seeking validation at that point. So I think if you can say to yourself, very honestly, look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm not seeking validation with this. I'm grateful for what I have, and I'll be humble about how I talk about it. Then anytime you do face resentment, you can go undeserved, unimportant, and I'm sorry they feel that way.
And look, you're going to be in a place, Ryan, where there's no version where you're going to do well and have it not affect somebody adversely. And sadly, a lot of those people are going to be people you care about. Sadly, a lot of those people you're going to lose that relationship. They're going to be family members. They're going to be best friends. They're going to be, who are these people in your life? People you grew up with. And you're going to be like, what the hell just happened? Like this wasn't supposed to go this way. This was supposed to be very different. And what we don't account for, and that's kind of, the genesis of all of this, what we don't account for is there is a power that we wield with success that can be used in good and bad ways, even if we don't intend it to. It can alienate and hurt a lot of people, and again, a way we don't intend it to. If you go the far end of the spectrum and you wield it as a weapon and you try to hurt people, that usually means you're wildly insecure, but that's fine. And most of us are wildly insecure. On the other hand, if you can treat it with humility, with gratitude, with respect, and by virtue of that, respect those that are around you, there's a tiny chance that you can have the best of both worlds, that you can have this incredible accomplishment and journey and keep all the people in your life around long enough to enjoy it with you and not at the expense of you.
Overthinking your startup because you're going it alone? You don't have to, and honestly, you shouldn't, because instead, you can learn directly from peers who've been in your shoes. Connect with bootstrapped founders and the advisors helping them win in the Startups.com community. Check out the Startups.com community at www.startups.com to see if it's for you. Could be just the thing you need. I hope to see you inside.